Okay, high tech. We are in our final stretch, and let me tell you, I am super excited for this next session. For those of you that were with us at KPMG, I hope you were there when we had a fireside chat with an absolutely amazing and brilliant individual. Marcelo had a fireside chat with a mountain climber, an incredible individual who has summited Everest dozens and dozens of times. And we've started to do these types of chats at High Tech because, again, from earlier this morning, right? Like recognizing the human element in leadership, recognizing the human element in technology. Yesterday, Marcelo also sat down with Maite Cáceres, a Formula One driver. And for those of you that were in the room, you know how powerful and impactful and emotional that session was. As she talked about, the trail that she's blazing and the incredible work that she is doing to break down barriers for women in motor racing. Today, I am super excited about this next session because it speaks to something that, or someone in a sport that is incredibly important to me. As I think you know, I'm a runner. I love to run. It's what I do. But also, every single person in my family runs. I happen to have the distinction of being the slowest runner in my family. I spend most of my free time at track meets and baseball games, and my children know the difference between DNS and a DNF. That did not start and did not finish. They have neither of those two on their records. And if you come to our house, you will certainly find us talking about cadence and splits and all of the, knowing when to cut in on a track. So I am crushing a little bit over here on our next panel because, I'm super excited to welcome a three-time U.S. Olympian middle distance runner who is here to chat with one of the high-tech originals, as Gene would call him, a high-tech OG, about this idea of the medalist mindset and how elite athletes, how you can translate these mindsets and values from athletics to business leadership. So please join me in welcoming first cybersecurity guru and high-tech OG, Bob West, and three-time U.S. Olympian middle distance runner, Shannon Rowbury.
Thanks so much.
Bob, it's all yours.
Good to see you.
Thank you, Omar.
Where's the clicker? Or someone else advancing it? By the way, the good news is that being one of the originals, they broke the mold way back then, so there's not going to be anyone else like me, which I think is a good thing. So it's great to bring up the rear, close with the best presentation. So just to give you a little bit of background on me, thank you so much. I've worked in cybersecurity for about 30 years, had a couple CISO roles, a couple with large banks. I've done consulting with Deloitte, EY, and my own, and I've had a couple of product roles, most recently with Palo Alto Networks, Prisma Cloud leadership team, and Edgardo's out there somewhere. Can't see you because of the bright lights, but it's good to see you today. I have never run at the same level as Shannon, but I ran in high school and college and still compete in my age group, despite the fact that I was born in the Paleozoic era, somewhere in that neighborhood. But one of the things that we want to do today is help you understand the commonalities in between the successful Olympians and people in the business context. So Shannon, you want to do a quick intro?
Yeah, so thank you so much for letting me come join you here today. Bob has been a friend since 2017, a mentor, and we started working together at just somewhat recently, start of December, but really felt that there was this great opportunity to translate the sports performance tools that Olympic athletes use for success. I think in the sports space, the idea of mindset and the way that you can, or the need to connect that to body, that you can't just train physically and expect to get your most out of yourself when you're under pressure in a race. And really by focusing on the mindset as well as the body, you can then have the optimal results. And as I started to speak to more and more clients, I noticed that there were these kind of keys that kept coming around, these continuities that I kept discovering, and so worked with a fellow Olympian to really distill them down so they could become approachable, and that they could be a process that takes you sort of from this internal goal orientation toward your North Star through to an external, how do you create a routine and team that will support you. So over the course of the slides, you're going to see this presentation is one that I normally deliver alone on stage as a keynote, but given Bob's deep history with high tech, given his deep experience in cybersecurity and in leadership positions, we felt like it would do a disservice to all of you to have it just be me on stage. So we're up here together. But as we go through this presentation, we're going to kind of take you through those 5 keys that we've identified as really important when you're thinking about the goals that you set and how you achieve them.
Yeah, no, this is great. And what you'll see right now are things that you'll typically see in the press, on social media. And just to give you some background, and I'll let you dig into the details, but so Shannon's personal record at 1,500 meters is 3:56, which if you translate it into a mile is 4:13, which isn't slow. 14:38 for 5,000 meters, which is about a 4:40 per mile pace. And when I grow up, I want to be that fast. But one of the things that I find really interesting about Shannon, in addition to having been a 3-time Olympian and having the longevity of her career, she was a professional athlete for 15 years, is the fact that she was ranked in the top 10 in the world for 10 years in a row. And even just a typical professional track and field athlete has a career length of about 4.5 years. And so to be able to be a professional athlete for 15 years and being ranked top 10 in the world is very rare. Shannon, I think it'd be good to So Shannon, it'd be good to give an overview of your timeline and tell me your greatest hits.
Well, the reason I put this slide up front is because if anyone ever hears of me, usually this is what they hear about, and they're accomplishments that I'm really proud of. But to me, it's more about the backstory and how I was able to achieve them. And to me, it's that consistency over a decade at top 10 in the world that speaks the most, I think. We can all, everybody can strive for one moment and of success, and sometimes we get lucky, sometimes we don't, but to be able to have success again and again, especially over time, is how you build a legacy. And it means that you've had to overcome challenges, you had to overcome obstacles. And I think that everyone in the room here, I think it's probably safe to assume that all of you are looking to build that legacy for yourself. So I share this just as sort of a starting point, because then I want to take you back through the journey I went through. But yes, to Bob's point, so 3 Olympics, Beijing, London, Rio, 3 area records. Area records means North, Central, and South American record. That was a 1,500 and 5K, as well as 2-mile, a world record in the relay, 2 world bronze medals. But I could only achieve those things by having a long career and figuring out how to kind of come back sometimes when it felt like all the odds were stacked against me.
Yeah. So we actually have a similarity in terms of having a circuitous route in terms of where we ended up. So I took the logical path from being a German major and going into technology, which I think everyone does, right? Okay, maybe not. But I think at the end of the day, part of what's interesting is the journey in and of itself. And Shannon, I don't know if you want to give some context in terms of how you started out and what your goals were.
Yeah, so the first key of this medalist mindset concept is goal setting, right? How do you achieve something? How do you set a path to something if you don't even know where you're going? And so at first, it is identifying what your North Star is. We call this, what is your Olympics? For me in sports, it was clear that once I made it on the sporting path, that the Olympics was the ultimate goal. But even for me, I didn't start with that as a kid as something I even wanted to do. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. The sports icons on TV who played basketball, football, and baseball, and they were incredible, but I didn't think I could, I couldn't ever be them because I wasn't a boy, and so athletics wasn't even something that I wanted to do or be, which is funny to think about when I've spent my entire adult career in sports. But I think when you're striving to do something, especially if what you're striving to do, if your Olympics is, if there aren't role models for it, I think high tech exists because we're trying to create role models and mentorship for each other in a space that maybe hasn't always been defined and designed for us. And certainly in athletics, the kind of persona of athlete is one that hasn't really fully included my experience as a female athlete, my husband's experience as a male distance runner. So I started out, I did dance, and what I discovered though in the process as I thought about myself was that I was really driven by the desire for self-improvement, by the desire to try to be at the best at the level that I was at. And so, for me at first it was, I chose Irish dancing over ballet because I discovered I really liked competition and I liked the opportunity to understand where I ranked, and that gave me feedback on how I could try to be better. And then eventually I found running, and I discovered that running as a sport for me gave me that same kind of real-time feedback, and it gave me the opportunity to continually try to improve. But when I started running as a freshman in high school, my goal wasn't to be on an Olympic team. My goal was to be the best on my team. And then I thought, okay, maybe I'll be the best. I want to be the best in my league, and then my conference, my state. I went to college. I went through the same process. And so I share that because I think it's this process of the long and the near, right? And also in the process, it was that goal setting wasn't just about a specific achievement, but it was about the why for that achievement and my drivers for that achievement. And so for me, it was really, how do I try to be the best at the world at something? How do I find the lane, the avenue that I can get into where I have the potential to be the best in the world at something? And so I encourage all of you, as it relates to this first key, this idea of goals, to really to think of them in that way, right? To think of them in terms of your drivers and motivations, and then set a specific target that really is in line with that.
Yeah. Well, and to build on what you're saying, so first of all, why just be a world-class distance runner? We can be a world-class Irish dancer, number one. And then secondly, I would assert that I look much better in a tutu than Shannon does. But, sorry. Well, actually, no, I'm not sorry. I hope I leave you with that visual.
Maybe next high tech, we'll get him in a tutu.
Yeah. Well, perhaps, after a drink or two at the bar. But, there, in the journey to be successful, success is never linear, right? You always have setbacks. And, I think one of the things that is a really important lesson to share is the foundational aspect of your experience and your experience that happened towards the end of your college career.
Yeah, so the first three keys, as I've been mentioning, so we talked about goals. That is very self-reflective and kind of just orienting yourself towards a North Star. The second key, and the third that we'll speak on in a moment, is also internal, and it's doing this self-assessment. So once you start to have a sense of where you want to go, before you bring it out into the world, how do you take a moment to really reflect on yourself, take a hard look at yourself, and understand what some of your obstacles have been in the past, or if you've had challenges, is there a through line? It's one thing to have a setback once. It's another to have the same thing happen again and again. And so I use the example in my life, my senior year of college. I had just won NCAA indoors, and my collegiate career was cut short by a stress fracture. For those of you who don't know, a stress fracture is a chronic injury, which means that there was something off. In my case, I have a left leg that's longer than my right. I had an injury in kindergarten, but that chronic injury came from something being off step after step, year after year, and that ultimately led to an injury that ended my collegiate career. I think that's a great and important parable in the business context, something that just keeps popping up again and again. Is there a way that rather than just putting a Band-Aid on and moving forward, that you can slow down to ultimately go faster? Can you do that root cause analysis, which we call prehab, to understand the real cause of that problem so that you can address it at the outset and reduce the likelihood that it'll rear its head later? So the idea of foundations is really this sense of prehab and that self-assessment and doing the work up front, because there will be challenges that are unexpected that come later, but if you can get ahead of the ones you know about, you're already setting yourself out on a better foot.
Yeah, and going in terms of the analogy in the business world, so we all work in technology and security. There's always issues in terms of scalability and availability in the technology world. And then we have the wonderful world of cybersecurity, where I spend my time, where we're under constant threats. And to your point, if you don't do root cause analysis, prehab, you're more than likely going to experience the same thing over and over again. Hopefully this moves forward.
Yeah.
There we go. So Shannon had her injury a year before the Olympic trials in 2008, and everyone in the sport wrote her off, right? I mean, there is no way that Shannon has a chance, a snowball's chance in Hades to make the Olympic team. So if we can roll the video, let's do it.
First up today will be the women's 1,500-meter final, and that's Shannon Rowbury, the best 1,500-meter runner in the United States, the former Irish step dancer as a youth, who was an All-American at Duke, where she majored in filmmaking, and she's the favorite here today. Fifth. Jordan Hassay continues to trail the pack.
Well, this is shaping up to be a kicker's race, as you see Trenaire Clement second from the last with the glasses on in the back of the pack. That's not where Clement is supposed to be. Her coach, J.J. Clark, there she is. So said that she needs to be up front toward the top of this race, and right now she is not in the mix.
Shannon Rowbury now has the lead. Kristen Worth-Thomas into second. Erin Donahue comes up into third. Here's the final lap about to unfold. And Shannon Rowbury starting to sprint clear of the field. Kristen Worth-Thomas is second. Erin Donahue is third.
Through the round, Shannon Rowbury showed that she'd be the class of the field. And believe it or not, a year ago, she had a stress fracture in her left hip. Her entire season was washed out, and now she stands less than 300 meters away from an Olympic berth.
Rowbury leads. Worth-Thomas second. Donahue third. Sarah Hall is fourth. And now here comes Usini into fourth place. But Shannon Rowbury all by herself in the final turn. Donahue closing in on Worth-Thomas for the second spot. Home straightaway looms, and Shannon Rowbury has the big lead. Kristen Worth-Thomas and Erin Donahue fighting for second and third, and Donahue edges ahead. Here's Rowbury in front, Donahue second, and Worth-Thomas third. They hit the line. Shannon Rowbury wins. Erin Donahue second. Kristen Worth-Thomas is third. All three have the A standard. That's your U.S. Olympic team.
So if you're paying attention to the text, they were saying Wilbury instead of Rowbury.
Yeah.
So did you also play in the traveling Wilburys?
I did.
I thought so.
Well, I
yeah.
wanted to say though, so yeah, that section, key 3, is we call mind, and the kind of words that I use in my own experience are this idea of controlling the controllables. And Bob mentioned it, they said it on the broadcast. A year prior to that race, I was on crutches, and everybody thought the idea of me making the Olympic team was a non-starter. But I did that prehab. I understood that it was the leg length difference that caused my injury. I got orthotics to mechanically correct it. I worked with PTs and chiropractors to get my body back moving correctly. I did the work in the gym daily to have a strong hip and core to make sure that I reduced the likelihood of that injury coming back. And so I didn't run my first step on the ground until August, which was, 8 months, 10 months before the Olympic trials. But I did the work, I understood, I controlled the controllables in that situation. And I think that, once again, I think there's business parables, life parables for all of us. My story that I share is specific to me, but I think it can be extrapolated and translated into many different people's lives and experiences. And it's really just to say that when you have clarity on that goal and you understand fully that it is possible and how it will be possible, when you're willing to put it in the work to get there, and when you're focusing on controlling the controllables, the things that are within your purview, right? It's very easy in a setback situation to start panicking, to look all around you, but when you can bring it back down to the here and now and understand you actually have the ability to impact and focus on those things, that's how you start to move forward in a challenge situation and ultimately have a shot at achieving what is possible.
Yeah, and a similar experience in my professional career. So I was Chief Information Security Officer for Bank One's retail group. Bank One is a JP Morgan Chase predecessor bank. My boss left and his replacement brought in his leadership team, so I needed to find another chair. And when I found out the news, let's just say that it was not pleasant. And there was a bit of shock for the first day or so. And I remember the next day when I woke up, the first thing I did was I made a list of the people that I knew within the bank and externally, and then started making phone calls. And as luck would have it, one of my colleagues went to Fifth Third Bank in Cincinnati. They didn't have a CISO at the time, and they were poor judges of character and talked to me and ultimately hired me. But what seems like a really dark day ultimately ended up being good news, because that was my first enterprise CISO role, and that set me up for the rest of my professional career. Shannon, one of the things that we talk about regularly is the notion of routine and predictability, and making sure that you have the proper foundation for what your goals are. So, want to talk about routine?
Yeah. So we had our first three keys, and now we're in, and they were very internal. And now we are getting to these external keys to focus on. You can't have a goal and keep it to yourself. If you really want to achieve it, you have to bring it out into the world. And so this fourth key, routine, is really about creating a lifestyle for yourself that will facilitate the achievement of that routine. Can you take another hard look, but now externally at your day-to-day on how you run it from wake up till bedtime, and figure out if you're actually leading it in a way that is helping you get to the goal that you've set, that big goal. If that big goal is big enough, maybe it's worth making some shifts for. And a very simple example, I did a daily audit in my own life. There was a point in my career, I try to do them with some frequency, because we always get into these habits where sometimes the day feels like it's running itself. But I remember at one point in my athletic career feeling like that I was just always rushing from one thing to the next, and feeling harried and lacking on my ability to fit in the finer details that I needed. I did what I call a daily audit, which is essentially having my ideal schedule side by side with my real schedule, like really looking at my day and how I was spending it. And I started to discover that, in any given week, there was about maybe 3 hours of driving time, simple driving time to appointments, that if I just shifted where the appointments were located, or if I stacked the appointments a little bit better together, I could probably salvage 3 hours, which, doesn't seem like that much. But if you then add it up over 52 weeks, that becomes 6.5 days. And it's such a small little thing, but there are moments like that when you actually do take the time to compare ideal versus reality, that you can start to see areas for improvement. Changes start with small little things, and how do you ensure that the things that you are doing are actually serving your goals?
Yeah, and in a business context, repetition, it breeds success, right? And especially when you're thinking about availability, protecting information, making sure that you're monitoring things that go bump in the night, understanding, are the things that I did last week, last month, are they still relevant right now, a year from now, given changes in technology, given changes in threats? And so being able to understand and repeat these processes so that you have metrics in terms of, are you achieving your objectives or not? And I think the key is team. Shannon.
Yeah, we ended with team as the final key, because we felt like you needed to understand your goal, you needed to understand yourself, you needed to understand your day first before you could bring in others, or really be thinking about the way that other people plug into it, right? As a leader, the goal isn't to stand on high and tell everyone else what to do. I had a team that enabled me to succeed in my sport, but that didn't mean they did all the work for me. I needed to understand, the areas where I needed that, the areas that I couldn't do myself, and build that team around me based on that. And so, we talk about team in terms of, once you have that clarity in a goal, how do you ensure that the team you build around you, and I think I love this talk right before, this idea of, how do you communicate even what the goal is? How do you make sure that your team is understanding? Because mindset really is that foundation to be built on. But how do you communicate to the team what you're trying to do? Make sure that they're on board so that they understand how they can help, how they can be part of the bigger goal. And also, how do you have those hard conversations with the people that maybe are part of your team but are not supportive of your goals? Sometimes it's just a matter of updating the information so that they can get on board. But in other instances, there's people in our lives that our success is threatening to them. Seeing us achieve just reminds them of what they're not able to do themselves because they're not willing to put in the work. And so in some instances, doing that team audit and saying, I'm grateful for the relationship that we had, but I am moving on to a new phase. I love you. I wish you well. And those conversations, hopefully you don't have to have often, but sometimes those also need to be had as well, because when the setbacks happen, the team becomes your first line of defense. These are the people, in the cybersecurity space, in the running space. When I had a bad race, or when I had an injury, or when something didn't go right, you very quickly discover who's in your corner and who isn't. And if you have built a strong team, they will become first the people whose cold shoulder you cry on, and then the people that help remind you of what it is you're trying to do and identify the ways that you can do the prehab and the work to be back to where you want to be. And then the whole flywheel starts again. So being really thoughtful once you've done that internal work, once you've created this clarity for yourself, being really thoughtful of who you bring around you.
Yeah, so when I've stepped into my leadership roles, one of the first things that I do is I look at my team and really try and understand, are these the right people? Are they in the right positions? Do they fit in terms of the team chemistry that I'm trying to build? Because ultimately, you can only succeed as an organization if you have the right people in the right roles. Do they have the right mindset? Do they want to get together? Do they want to have fun? Because ultimately, one of the things I like to do is have fun, hard stop. Shannon will probably lie about that. No, in all seriousness, life is too short. And so going back to just one anecdote. So when I was CISO at Fifth Third Bank, we had a formal project plan on practical jokes. I can tell you more during cocktail hours, but I wasn't the one that was picking them. It was my team. And think of throwing a dart on the dartboard, and whose turn, whose opportunity is it today to be the victim? the recipient of incredible amount of love.
But it's so important, right? Because it's
yeah.
hard. If you're going to go after something big, it's going to take a while, and there's going to be so many moments where you wonder why you did it in the first place. And having those people around you to, like in a very sport context, but it's relatable to everything. When I would go do a workout on the track by myself, I would dread it, and the results would be mediocre. I would go to the track, I could do the same workout with a group of friends, I would get better results, and I'd walk away happy, having had fun. I'd still be sore, and I still worked hard, but the experience of it was completely different. And so when you have a team who you look forward to working with, when you're out there with people that really build you up and lift you up, it is a game changer.
Yeah, without question.
Well, if you want to go back, so the
sure.
last slide was just kind of an overview of the 5 keys we've talked about, trying to distill it down for you to see this idea of goals, foundation, mind, that internal work that you do, and then progressing into that external routine and team that you're building in your day-to-day and around you. Because really, we believe success is a mindset. It starts with the way that you approach any challenge. And the only thing that you can control really is in between your own ears. So how do you make sure that you are making the most of what you've got?
Yeah, for sure. So this is one of my favorite pictures, and one of the questions that I get asked regularly is, what's the deal with the lipstick?
Oh, completely off topics. Well, I guess, anyway, going back to motivations, drivers, goals, team. In 2014, I was racing in Paris, and I was very nervous. And one of the people who's my core team was my grandma. She passed in 2010. I called her Noni. But so Noni was of the era that, you know, you got dolled up for any occasion. And so one fun way for me to sort of shift my mindset in that moment was to throw on some red lipstick as a reminder of her, as a reminder of how I even got started on this whole crazy journey. She put me in Irish dancing as a kid after I broke my leg. It was also a really interesting, I think, transformative moment for me. Not only did the race ultimately go well, and it became something that I maintained as a tradition in my competitions moving forward, but also it ignited a debate around what it is to be an athlete that was sort of helped me understand why I never wanted to be an athlete in the first place. I won in 2014 indoors, back-to-back days and 2 events, and all of the news articles after the race were not about my performance, but were about the fact that I wore lipstick and whether I should have or shouldn't have, and it really spoke to the perception of what an athlete is. And so I think bringing it full circle, being in this room here with you today, seeing the way that the high-tech community comes together to lift up, to set new examples, to be role models for someone else who maybe hasn't had someone to look up to is so essential, because we need to expand the idea of what it is to be a leader in our spaces.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Shannon.
Yeah.
I think we have a little bit of time for some questions.
Right.
Hey Shannon, very nice to meet you.
Yeah, you
Go
too.
Sacred Heart.
Oh, okay.
Boys that are in track and field and cross country runners. So
In San Francisco?
I don't know you, but I like you already.
Yeah.
St. Francis.
Oh, wonderful. I went to Sacred Heart Cathedral, and that's a Catholic high school in San Francisco.
So question for you. How do you recover mentally when you have a bad race? You know, when you do everything right, the expectations are high, you're poised to make it your best, and you just have a bad day.
Yes.
And also on mental health, how do you preserve it and care of yourself to endure and to keep growing through, just the pain of the training and the seasons? Thank you.
Yeah, so the mental side of it, so to answer your second question first, I think that a lot of it is coming back to why I was doing something. So sustaining that long career, the daily effort all felt like it was part of achieving the bigger goal. So it was only when I started to resent that that I knew it was time to step away from the sport. Throughout my career, having clarity on what I was going after and having those people around me to remind me when I started to, wonder, should I miss these things? You make hard choices to go after a big goal. And so to answer your second question, for me, I think it was that clarity in the goal, the reason for the goal, and why I was doing it. To your first question about overcoming the bad days, I had a process that I use after every race called Good, Better, Next. And I've actually used this with sales teams that I've worked for to kind of close the loop on sales cycles as well. But it's like this idea of reflecting on the race that just took place, giving yourself up to 24 hours, feel the feelings. You should be upset. It means you care. That's fine. But then, next day, wake up. Okay, what were 3 things that were good? What did I do well? Then one thing that I could have done better, and one thing that I want to do moving forward. That's the next. And I purposefully have the 3 things that I did well, the 3 goods, because as a high achiever, perfectionist, I always think about what I could have done better than what I did right. I think it's important to remember that that effort is important, and to give ourselves credit for the things that we did while still being able to identify room for improvement.
Yeah.
Hi, Liz.
First of all, that was amazing. I couldn't, I think I got a little carpal tunnel typing on my notes. All this stuff. So just wanted
I got a good
thank you
massage
for that. I'll
therapist
send
I
you
can
my,
recommend.
healthcare
But you will
card.
be world class in terms of typing on your phone.
Absolutely. It was too fast. I wanted to capture every word. So thank you. I feel so full. This is amazing. So grateful for this opportunity. So question, what are some lessons, I'm in cybersecurity as you know, what are some lessons that can be learned from the discipline and determination required in both cybersecurity, and Olympic running, if you can share some insight there.
You want to share first?
Yeah. I mean, when I think of what you've been talking about, you have the prehab, right? You have root cause analysis. So you have issues, right? You're always going to have security breaches. And the question then becomes not, am I going to have them, but what's the severity of it? And so after you clean the mess up, doing some root cause analysis to understand why did it happen, what can we do to prevent it again or minimize the damage more accurately. So rather than having a 5-alarm fire, you have a brush fire. It's this whole process of continuous improvement. And when you have a breach, it's at a point in time, right? Because a year from now, you're going to have a different ecosystem. You probably have different technology. You may have changes in the organization. And one of the things that you have to do to make sure that you stay on top of the game in terms of protecting an environment and an enterprise is really go through exercises to make sure that if there's an issue, are we on top? Do we have the right people around the table? Do I have the people in communications that are talking to the press? Because when an issue happens and CNN or Bloomberg or the Wall Street Journal starts talking, the perception of the company is going to be how you communicate the news, right? And so you have to have all these pieces together and having everything as disciplined as you can to be able to respond the next time. So you have this process of continuous improvement.
Yeah, it's been interesting as we've worked with different teams, seeing where what topics resonate. And so when we designed the idea of Medalist Mindset it does go progressively through, but really the goal is to provide tools that you can pull when you need to. And so when I've worked with groups of CISOs, the things that have been the topics that come up most often are resiliency and burnout. And so a lot of it is around how do you control the controllables when a setback happens? How do you reflect on your routine? Because as a CISO, you have so many things coming at you and your plate is so full. Are there ways that you can create a little bit more balance? And that team that's around you, especially that core team at home, how do you ensure that they are on board? Or maybe you need to shift the narrative a little bit. When we get to sales teams, it's a lot more about, they're earlier in their career. And so, maybe their responsibilities aren't as high, but they're trying to figure out, how do I achieve what these CISOs have done, right? They see you as a goal to try to, as their North Star that they can try to achieve that position. And so for them, it's like, how do I get there? And when I work with groups, especially groups of women or with groups that are underrepresented, it's a lot about goals. How do you even envision it's possible? And I would say for that, it's actually starting at the end, finding the team of people who can mentor you. In my case, I was fortunate to find Bob as a friend and a mentor. And then using that to help you create goals that are maybe bigger than you imagined was possible. And then start building from there.
Yeah, and the other thing I would add to that is organizational resiliency. So one of the things when CISOs that I talk to, they're looking at their teams, people are always going to move on, right? So you have the notion of succession planning. And that's one of the things that I see systemically is that, CISOs build their teams, but sometimes they don't prepare for what's next, right? And so being able to identify talent that can step in because you may be pulled away from the office for whatever, right? And you still need to continue to operate your function. And so having not just a succession plan for you as a CISO, but looking at things from who's going to fill in for the next people down. Do people have knowledge about multiple parts of the organization? So if people are working in security operations, for example, are they running vulnerability management tools? Are they running cloud security tools? So hopefully you can cross-pollinate those skill sets and ultimately create a more resilient organization. Of course.
Patricia?
Thank you for bringing Shannon to the high-tech familia. We're so excited to have you. So Shannon, there are many pathways that are very similar between what you're doing and high-tech's mission, which is pull up and push up the next generation of emerging leaders. Could you share with us a little bit more about the work that you do with kids?
Oh, yeah. So in 2012, in the middle of my running career, my husband and I started a nonprofit called Imagining More. And it was really built on this idea of expanding the idea of what an athlete is and can be. And it stemmed from those lack of role models, from that expectation that I fit into a box that wasn't representative of the world that I was living in. And I've had the opportunity to work with Nike as a consultant in the women's vertical to try to help them create better products for women and kids. I've had the opportunity to represent the Department of State as a sports envoy to Morocco, and then hosting camps at home in the Bay Area around this idea of empowerment through sport. And really, I would say the guiding principle of this empowerment through sport is relevant to any kind of mentorship, right? So it's giving people the tools, foundational tools that they need to have success, whatever that looks like, right? We're not dictating the end goal. We're giving them the tools to achieve the most out of their potential. And so when I work with kids, it's I don't just talk about the skills and drills. I talk about, how do you demystify the college recruiting process and understand how you can use your talent in sport and your hard work in sport to get a college, either get into a college, maybe even with a scholarship. How do you fuel for sport? So not just, how do I fuel for a workout, but like, how do I make sure that my body is foundationally healthy so that I can be in this for the long haul? And then ideas like sports psychology, I was introduced to it in college. The earlier we can give kids these tools, I think the more resiliency that they will have. And so for me, I was raised under the idea that my high school motto, Sacred Heart Cathedral, enter to learn, leave to serve, because I think that the best leaders are the ones who exist in their community, and they really identify areas where they can help out, that we're in this together, not on high telling you what to do, but really in the trenches. And serving the need that truly exists, not the one that we imagine.
Yeah, and building on that in the business context, I think a lot of times leaders get the notion of leadership upside down. In my mind, I subscribe to the servant leadership model where, I'm not there to bark down orders. I'm there to be a utility hitter, if you will, and make sure that my team has the right tools to execute their jobs, and if they have problems, that I'm there to remove the roadblocks and support them as they go along.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both, because you're amazing role models.
Thank you, Patricia.
So I know we're at time. I'm assuming all of you probably want to go get some sunlight and fresh air. Who's up next?
We're at.
Well, I know, but do we just get to be like, see you later, or is Omar coming back up for us?
I think we're going to empower. I think we're going to empower ourselves.
Let us chit chat.
Yeah, no. In all seriousness, thanks so much. High Tech has a warm place in my heart. It's so great to have Shannon here. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.